Good morning, guys. We are today learning about the seedless plants and seeded plants, and they drop a bunch of information at you. I want to make sure that you are doing both of these. So you should watch the seedless plants on Brain Pop as well as taking that quiz. And then you should also be able to go to seed plants. So we have seedless and seeded plants. And then I thought it would be helpful. The quizzes, sometimes they're kind of hard and they don't ask the information that I necessarily want you to have. So I wanted to make a lovely little graphic organizer for you that would compare and contrast these. You are welcome to make it along with me. You are welcome to watch. You do not have to do this. I definitely would have you probably do this in your notebooks at school. So I would recommend it. But if you don't, it will probably not be the end of the world. So let's see if I can get this to work. Here is our dot camera. And I'm going to start by making a Venn diagram, of course, because that is what we use to compare and contrast. So I have my lovely salad bowl that I usually eat lunch out of, and I'm just going to trace the circumference. Ooh, math word, right? Distance around a circle, just in case. And I'm going to do this twice with an overlapping. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you prefer a T-chart, that's also going to be fine. So we have a lovely little Venn diagram here. And I'm going to separate it into seed plants. Well, we'll do seedless over here, I guess. And then my seed plants over here. And that means that stuff that ends up in the middle is going to be things that they both have in common. So after listening, I think that might be the easiest place to start. I heard some words that hopefully were familiar to you. I definitely heard that both of these are plants, which means by definition that they are autotrophs. That is a word you should remember from earlier this year. It means they can form their own food. Now, plants do this through photosynthesis. That means that they are going to use the energy from the sun to power the chemical reaction between water and carbon dioxide, rearrange those molecules into the glucose and the oxygen that they release. So that should not be new to you. These are also called eukaryotes. Now, this word is big and a little bit scary, but I'm going to dissect it for you. So eu means good or true. So this means that they have a good something. Kary, as a root word, means nucleus. So you've probably heard of the nucleus of a cell. It is kind of like the control center, a little bit like a brain. It is where all the DNA is stored on a regular basis. So it is like a vault that contains all the instructions for how to do whatever the cell wants to do. And then oats makes it, of course, a noun. So being a eukaryote means that they have a nucleus. So if you were to sketch out a little plant cell here, plant cells tend to have more of a square-ish, rectangular-ish shape. Nucleus tends to be a pretty big organelle. So I'm going to draw it here. It's usually circular. I'm going to put a big N in it for nucleus. So all plant cells have a nucleus that is going to control their actions. Something else that I heard is chloroplasts. All plant cells have chloroplasts. This is where photosynthesis happens. So they might look like little beans. They tend to gather towards the side that is receiving the most amount of sunshine, which makes sense, because that is going to be where they get the sunshine to power that. So I should label these chloroplasts. This is where the photosynthesis is happening. Something else I heard Tim and Ruby say is that these plant cells have cell walls. So this is different from me and you and why we would not be crunchy if you ate us. So when you take a nice big steak, a piece of steak or turkey or chicken, it's chewy, chomp, chomp protein, right? We know this. When you eat a raw veggie such as celery or a carrot, you should notice that it is crunchy under ideal situations. That is because of the cellulose in the cell wall. So this cell wall allows the plant to have shape, and it is an extra layer of protection. Some bacteria have this too, which can make them super difficult for us to kill. This is kind of the equivalent of how our viruses, they all have that protein coat, but some of them also have that fatty coating too. So it's an extra layer of protection, and we're going to call it the cell wall. This is why when you eat corn, sometimes that kernel part will come out. That is literally the cell wall, which is made of cellulose, which our body cannot break down. So our digestive systems aren't built for that. We learned earlier this year that digestive systems are not created equal. So we are just not very good at breaking down this cellulose that's in the cell wall. So that is why sometimes you will see plant parts in your poop. Gross. Something else, what do all plants need? Now, they might not have specifically said this, but hopefully you know this from, just life in general. All plants are going to, or all land plants will say, we're not going to talk about our water plants quite yet, do need the sunshine. The sun is going to be the source of all of the energy that will power the chemical reactions that allow these guys to photosynthesize. All plants also need water. So some plants are better adapted, like a cactus, to live in very arid environments. Other plants are going to have structures that go deep into the ground. What else do all plants need? Well, they need some CO2. Remembering that the C is for carbon. We have one carbon. If there is no number there, it means one. And then O2, meaning we have two oxygens going on here. So this is a molecule, two or more different elements. We have a carbon bonded to two different oxygen molecules. And the plants are going to use the power from the sun to break this apart and rearrange it into what becomes glucose for us. So is there anything else you can think of that all plants have in common? Oh, you're so right. They're all producers, right? These guys are at the bottom of the food web. These are very likely the first terrestrial multicellular living things. Oh, that's something else we can add. One of the definitions of a plant is that they are multicellular, meaning more than one cell. A single-celled algae, while it is very planty, because it's only one cell, is no longer classified as a plant. It's classified as a protist. So in order to be a plant, the first thing we need to know is that they have basic needs just like us. They need sun, water, carbon dioxide. They are autotrophs who can photosynthesize. All plants are by definition multicellular. They are eukaryotes. This is a new word. So if you have a stack of index cards at home, or you are keeping a list of words you might want to know or that are new, eukaryotes is a new one for you. They do have a good, true nucleus that allows them to be more organized and have more organelles in the long run. Cells, plant cells are going to be a little bit rectangular-ish with a very strong cell wall that gives them an extra layer of protection. There will also be chloroplasts inside, as well as a nucleus. There's a bunch of other stuff going on in there too, don't worry. And they are producers, so at the base of every single food chain. So what about my seedless plants? What makes them so different? Well, these were probably our first plants. Some examples are going to be moss, liverwort, right? Ferns. So if you were to go to a seed supply store, you would not be able to find seeds for these guys. That is because instead of seeds, they are using spores. So spores are unprotected, whereas seed has a hard outer covering and is kind of a plant that's hibernating. These spores are going to be dispersed by the wind, and if they land somewhere that is habitable, they will start to reproduce and make a new plant. So this is a very unpredictable way to reproduce. So spores instead of seeds. And these spores depend on wind dispersal. So I don't know, how do you draw wind? We'll draw it like this. Woo. And then your little spores might be just blowing in the wind. Does that look like wind dispersal? Remember, if you can't tell what your drawings are, it's a good idea to label them. Wind dispersal. Okay, so hopefully I spelled that right. These can be both vascular and non-vascular. So there's a lot of ways to classify plants. We're looking at seedless versus seeded. Other scientists might do vascular versus non-vascular. So within seedless plants, you can have vascular plants as well as non-vascular plants. Very quickly, non-vascular plants, they are very small. They do not have a deep root system. They can't transport the water and nutrients through many cells. So each cell has to be able to have contact to the water. So as a body, these are going to stay smaller. They're not going to be able to grow tall. You can guess that it is probably a non-vascular plant if it almost looks fuzzy like the mosses that we see growing on stones. So what makes these different, we're going to have two different groups here. We have non-vascular. And these non-vascular guys have a very special name, bryophytes. These guys we can kind of thank all modern plants and animals for. So the bryophytes were some of our first land-dwelling plants, and they were able to actually set up shop on the really hard, rocky surface of Earth. So where did the first plants come from? Well, it was probably a bryophyte who was able to crack down these rocks through weathering and erosion, which then made soil that plants millions of years later could use as I guess their anchoring. So bryophytes kind of created our soil for us. And what's interesting about these guys, so where a tall plant is kind of using like a straw to suck water up from the ground, my non-vascular plants have to be near the source of water. So they're going to directly absorb their water through those cell walls here. So is this super important? No, you'll probably learn about this in plant biology in college, but bryophytes kind of get a shout out for being pretty interesting creatures that really set the stage for later life. Most of the plants that we're going to talk about this year, though, are vascular. So you are vascular. You have a network of vessels within your body, your arteries and your veins and your capillaries. These plants have vessels as well. And the vessels primarily are going to be for carrying water and nutrients from the soil up, which goes against gravity. And then we are also going to have some nutrients from the leaves that needs to travel maybe down to help build more roots and things like that. So what's interesting about these vascular plants, they have channels. They're much like a blood vessel in your body that is going to allow water and nutrients to be transported throughout. So these guys, therefore, can get taller. They can be much longer. They're going to have an extensive root system that's pretty fancy. A lot of times these root systems overlap. So what we might consider one plant actually is a group of plants that are all connected underneath the ground by their roots, which makes them kind of cool. All right, I'm kind of running out of time here. So let's jump over to our seeds. My seeded plants, how can I tell that it had a seed? Well, it's going to be a flowering plant most of the time, or it is going to have some kind of cones, which are a modified flower. So these are going to be all the trees that you see blooming now. This will be your fruits and veggies that we eat. And a good way to tell that it is a seeded plant is through the flower. These are all vascular. So where some of our seedless plants are vascular, all of these guys are vascular. I'm going to use the same color. They're all vascular. I don't need to rewrite what that means because I've already written it. I can look over here. So maybe I have a little dotted line that connects them, or I can add into the middle that they both include vascular plants. So what does it mean to be vascular? Again, it means I have roots, I have stems, I am big, I am tall, I can transport nutrients throughout the entire body of the plant. Within that, we're going to split into two groups. We have angiosperms, which are probably the prettier of the two, and my gymnosperms. Oh, there's Tracker. He is keeping us safe from all those evil squirrels that live in our plants. So angiosperms, these guys have flowers. These guys have pollen. So that is what is giving you your allergies this year. And generally, once they're pollinated, these guys are going to form a fruit for us. This is most of the plants that you come in contact with. They are ones that we deliberately plant because they are food source. So most plants are angiosperms, easy to remember. Within angiosperms, we are going to split into monocots, like a corn kernel, and a dicot, like a traditional, like a sunflower seed. And we'll be dissecting these seeds later this week, so please don't, or next week, I guess, don't worry about those words right now, except that mono, of course, means one, and di is a prefix that means two. The cot is referring to the cotyledon, which is like the little baby plant that is stored inside the seed. Very quickly, then we have gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are your conifers. So when we think of gymnosperms, think cones. There are both male and female cones. I didn't know that. But if you go outside and you try to pull apart a pine cone, hopefully you'll be able to see some seeds within that. Generally, this is going to be our conifers. There's also kyads and some other weird plants that we don't really come in contact with. A lot of these have actually gone extinct to make room for the angiosperms, but this is what our dinosaur friends would eat, millions of years ago. All right, so I have 15 seconds left to wrap it up. Seedless plants, seeded plants. Seedless plants came first, then have evolved into seeded plants. Our most common seeded plant and plant that we're going to come in contact with are angiosperms, so we'll spend a lot of our time on that.